right, so we're going to give an overview of the GMAT test format and timing. If you're really familiar with the test already, you can skip this video, but we'll keep it brief. So there are 4 parts to the test. The first part of the test is the essay, and the essay is a 30-minute question with a single prompt, and it's asking you to evaluate the line of reasoning that the author lays out in that prompt. Now, in the essay, you want to focus on addressing criticisms to the author's viewpoints and thought process. And you also want to bring in examples of why the thought process was poorly reasoned and how it could have been made better. But it's a fairly straightforward essay. A lot of people overinvest in terms of studying for this or get a little bit too nervous about this. It's scored out of 6 points, and the best you can get is a perfect 6.0. It is scored by a human and a computer simultaneously. So if a human gives you a 6 and the computer gives you a 5, what they do is they average these scores and they say, okay, you get a 5.5 out of 6 points on this section of the test. Now, if you want to see an example of a perfect essay in the official guidebook 2019, you can go to page 825, and page 825 shows a perfect essay. It's relatively short. You could pretty much reuse that final paragraph in that essay, and the construction of the essay is very straightforward in terms of an intro, a body paragraph, and a conclusion. Now, some people split up the body into 3 different short paragraphs, but you can keep it as 1 paragraph, and I think it actually flows a little bit better if you do. So that is the method I used. I got a 6 out of 6 on my essay on test day, and I really did not reinvent the wheel. You want to focus on using transition language like firstly, secondly, and finally, and have that stuff kind of mapped out in advance of the test. The next section we'll talk about is the integrated reasoning section called the IR. It's also a 30-minute section. There are 12 questions, but most of them have multiple answer choices. So because there's multiple answer choices, you have to get all answer choices on the question correct in order to get the single point for that question. So for example, a question might have 3 sub-questions under it, and if you miss just one of those sub-questions, you'll lose the entire point for that question. Now, this is weirdly enough scored out of 8 points, not 12. And a perfect score of 8 indicates that you probably got 0, 1, or even 2 wrong. But this is the most stringent part of the test from a timing perspective. And it's mainly because you have to answer multiple questions on each question. But my recommendation is don't try to answer every single question if you're struggling on the time in your practice. Just try to get as many correct as you can in that limited amount of time, which means skipping questions that you know you probably don't have a great chance of getting right in under 2.5 minutes. So this is 2.5 minutes per question. Now, onto the quant section. So the quant section is a 62-minute section. This used to be longer. It was recently revised, and it is now 31 questions, which is still an average of 2 minutes per question, which it was originally when it was 37 questions as well. So you have 2 minutes per question. A lot of people blow it on test day by letting go of the timing. So we gotta get used to feeling strong on the timing, being able to understand intuitively when we're going over that 2-minute mark. And so in your practice, it's important to keep a stopwatch next to you, whether it's on your phone or whether you have an actual physical timer with you, just so you have perspective on how long you're taking on each question. Now, when you're prepping, I don't need you to necessarily hold yourself to 2 minutes because you are trying to learn as you prep. But if you're in a testing environment, if you're drilling practice questions, trying to replicate the game day process, I would recommend you keep yourself to 2 minutes a question on average. But some questions will be slightly longer and some will be slightly shorter. My goal on quant section is to get out of the gate very quickly so that I have more time near the end of the test. And a lot of people think that the first 10 questions on quant are the most important questions of the test, but this is a total myth. The entire test holistically is what matters. And what really matters the most is setting a high floor. So you want to set a high floor and not worry so much about the ceiling. You can get up to 10 questions wrong and still get a fantastic score on the quant section. So the best score you can possibly get is a 51. I like my clients to shoot for upper 40s. So that would be maybe 46 plus on the quant section. So if you're scoring below 46, use that as kind of a barometer to tell how far away you are from an amazing score. Now, anything above, I'd say a 48 is pretty hard to obtain. Like those are really hard fought points. But I think the difference between a mid 30s and a 46 is really just getting the easy questions and medium questions right, and then just pretty much guessing 50-50 on the hards if you can. But like I said, you can get 10 out of the 31 questions wrong and still get a 46 plus. So it's not necessarily about accuracy as much as it is about answering the right questions. The verbal is scored out of 51 points max as well, but on the verbal side, the number of points we need to target is a little bit lower. I view a great score as being anything in the 40s out of 51. So it's more competitive on the verbal in terms of the points versus the percentile rank, versus on quant, a 46 is still only like a 70 something percentile if I had to guess off the top of my head. But you don't want to focus on the percentile rank in quant. You just want to focus on this 46 number. And the same goes for verbal. In verbal, a lot of times people see their percentile rank and they think, oh, I'm amazing. But in reality, there's a lot of points that can be added. So even if you're getting a 40 on verbal, you still have 11 potential points you could add to get to a score of 51. But a 40 is a very high percentile rank, and that's typically what I like to shoot for. So 40 plus is a good barometer, just like 46 plus. If you're getting, say, a 35 in quant and a 35 in verbal, I would say you have more work to do on the quant to get up to this 46 number than you do on the verbal, because you only have 5 points to go to get up to a 40. So kind of evaluate relative to these target numbers what you should be scoring and where you're at, and that'll help you along the way with what you need to do in order to raise your score, focused on quant versus verbal. Now within the verbal, it's a 65-minute portion of the test. It's the longest section, 36 questions. So you have about 2 minutes a question, but a little bit less than 2 minutes a question. If you had 2 minutes a question, it would be 72 minutes. So it comes out to like a minute 50 a question. And we want to allocate our time wisely because there are 3 different question types in this category. So under the verbal falls sentence correction. And sentence correction is where they give you a sentence and part of it's underlined. You're asked to choose the best answer choice that fills in that underlined section. And answer choice A is always the underlined as it appears in the question itself. So they give it to you in the question itself originally with answer choice A. You also have critical reasoning, which we call, so we have sentence correction, critical reasoning, CR. Critical reasoning is like a 1-paragraph section where you then have a prompt and 5 answer choices. There are multiple subtypes in here, but it's basically about analyzing an argument, choosing an answer choice that either strengthens or weakens, or some other sort of prompt along those lines. And we also have the reading comprehension section. This is where they give you a couple paragraphs or like a whole passage that deals with a certain topic. You're asked to read it and then evaluate. This one actually has 4 questions following it typically. So you'll read one passage and answer 4 questions. They are spaced out separately. Now, one important thing to note about every part of the test is you cannot go backwards after you've answered a question. You can only go forwards. And in order to proceed through the test, you have to write down, or you have to choose an answer. You cannot just blindly skip. And in fact, if you are going to fall short of finishing a section, if you're on question, say, 25 out of 31 on the quant section, and there's only 2 minutes left, it's important that you at least get a guess in on each of those questions to try to maximize your points, because any questions that you don't answer are considered wrong. So Just make sure you finish every section, even if you have to guess on questions. Guessing intelligently is a huge part of the game. On verbal, as we discussed with quant, I said you could get about 10 wrong and still get a great score. On verbal, you should be shooting for less than 6 wrong. So it's much more stringent. And if you're getting less than 6, you'd be scoring in the low to mid 40s. Up to 10 wrong on quant, you are still scoring in the upper 40s. So it's a lot harder on verbal to get a great score just in terms of like accuracy. This is why a lot of people in the ordering of the test, which we'll touch on next, choose to take the verbal as the first portion because the attention to detail is that much more important.